Okay, welcome back. We're still working on ecological engineering. I promised you guys some concrete examples, so we'll dive straight into it. So what do we have here? Right here, this reminds me to tell you again that ecological engineering is really an old concept. And right in this picture we have some rice fields in Indonesia. Been used for thousands of years, and they really use a lot of the ideas of ecological engineering. If we look at it, you have terraced rice fields, you're using gravity to drive water through these different terraced fields, you're tying in nutrients, you're keeping them in the fields, and you're also using solar energy. So a very basic example of ecological engineering. Now if we look at the next slide, here we are in Malaysia, and you can see in the foreground some rice fields. So we're taking that old concept and really modifying it a bit, making it a little more modern, because in the background what we have is a golf course. And look at these are lighted up all night so businessmen can play 24/7. And these areas use a lot of fertilizer, and that fertilizer potentially can destroy aquatic ecosystems, but if you buffer the area with rice fields, you can use the fertilizer from the golf courses to fertilize the rice and clean up the water before it gets to an aquatic ecosystem. So using something old in a new way. All right, here's another example that I really find interesting. This is a rice field in China. Many of these have been used, the same area, for thousands of years. Now, how have they been able to do that without destroying the soil fertility? Well, if we look at it, again, you have the rice field you often see in China, but it is broken up by a series of plants, weeds, that are very good at picking up phosphorus. So these plants are put here to soak up phosphorus leaking from the fields. Now, periodically, these plants are harvested, fed to pigs, so now you're growing protein for the population, and the feces from the pig, which contains the phosphorus, is put back into the rice field. So a very simple but clever way to do ecological engineering. Here is an example of some of the work by H.T. Odom. I talked about the cypress swamp being used to clean up wastewater. You can see it here in the slide. You can take wastewater, do primary treatment, sometimes secondary treatment, and polish it through a cypress swamp. Because these plants require phosphorus and nitrogen, they pull it out of the sewage. And again, eventually this goes to the groundwater and back to the town. Much cleaner than it was. Here's another shot of the cypress dome. Again, cleaning up things before it hits a freshwater aquifer. Now, we mentioned earlier an advantage is you're getting a lot of the energy for ecological engineering from solar sources. And if we look at this slide, you can see the difference between eco-technology and the cypress swamp and conventional technology. Overall, the energy requirements are quite modest, and almost no fossil fuel requirements. So a nice big advantage as we look at the price of fossil fuels rising as they have been recently. Okay, this slide shows you that it's not black and white. There's a continuum, and you can see a wetland on one side, various forms of modern standard engineering practices. But as you move along this continuum toward the wetland, fossil fuel energies decrease and the solar inputs increase. Okay, here's another example in the Midwest in Illinois. You can see that several experimental wetlands have been used to clean up river flows, and the advantage of this is not only phosphorus and nitrogen being pulled off, but also that the sediment load is decreased. The water that comes back has much less sediment. Another very famous person in ecological engineering is John Todd, and he came up really with the microcosm approach. And if we look at this example here, what you see is a way to clean up sewage water at a school. And water would come in straight from the toilets and go into these microcosms, little plastic discs here that contain different types of ecosystems. They might be anaerobic, they might be aerobic, and they're used to clean up the water. And eventually the water goes into constructed wetlands, and it's supposed to be clean enough to drink, clean as well water, but most of the students don't want to touch it because they know where it came from. All right, so wastewater treatment, besides phosphorus and nitrogen, if you use certain types of plants, you can also take care of heavy metals. Here's an example of what we could have. Most people don't want to live near a sewage treatment plant, but we could have a sewage treatment plant that looks like a greenhouse, that cleans water, pulls out the nutrients. And here's another example of using microcosms, what a greenhouse, basically a greenhouse that cleans water. Here's another shot of using different types of sewage treatment, pulling off heavy metals, using flowers, things that you could sell, trees, and fertilizing lawns to clean up water at the same time. And again, you think about it, you're reducing the use of fertilizers in the long run too. Here's an area in Arizona where they have greened the area without adding tons of additional water by constructing wetlands that clean up sewage. So a way to have your cake and eat it too, in a way. Here's an example of modern cities. In the old days, we liked to create a system where our rivers were channelized, moving very fast, but increasingly people are looking to restore these to a more natural system. Again, this cleans water. It also is probably more beautiful in most people's eyes, protects habitat, and is also probably a little safer than a stream moving this fast. Here's an example of what you could do with a parking lot with buffer areas to pick up some of the runoff, and that's very important in some areas in cities where runoff is a huge problem. So we're going to stop here again, kind of got a smorgasbord here of applications, and we're going to talk about one particular concrete example of ecological engineering of a place I visited in Africa a few years ago. So I'll see you next time.